Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. You didn't stop them, and now they will make you pay. You could have said basta, but instead you said no more bashing. And now they're going to make you pay. Yes, you, every one of you, and you in the airport, and you in the hotel, and you in your living room, you're going to pay. Hello?
Yes, we warned people about this headline. We warned them it was coming. I remember some in the mainstream media saying you were crazy about, 2 years ago for saying this. But banks may force clients to cover costs of negative Nordic rates. Back in 2012, when Denmark first cut its benchmark deposit rate below zero, commercial banks balked at the suggestion they could share that cost with retail clients for fear of losing business. Now, with rates even lower and the prospect of further cuts, banks are considering charging the people whose deposits provide their funding. So the ECB's deposit rate is now negative 0.2%, and Denmark cut its to negative 0.35%. This is the deposit rate for banks in the central bank depositing their funds there.
As we warned, there's been no deterrent. That's to have stopped banks from committing fraud. There's no rule of law. So they're now in negative interest rates. They will charge customers money to park their money at the bank.
The first bank has not yet done it. They have charged institutional bank account holders, but they haven't charged the ordinary retail investor yet. And they've been reluctant to do that. But this is the most remarkable bit of this entire piece. And it is so important for everybody out there to understand what is happening in this sentence, in this next bit here. So, banks, the article says, may now be less reluctant to pass on negative rates to clients thanks to surplus liquidity. The quote comes here. Banks don't have a need for deposits. And the demand for loans by households and firms is weak, Niels Storm Steinbeck, chief economist at the Danish Bankers Association, said in a phone interview. The likelihood has never been greater that banks will pass on negative rates to customers, he said.
Well, this is remarkable because the banks are saying we don't need deposits and we don't need to make loans. Okay, they don't need to pay interest on deposits. They don't need deposits because the banks are giving them free quantitative easing cash injections to roll over their bad debts on their balance sheet that they acquired through committing fraud, massive fraud. They have these huge debts that are insolvent, but the government chooses to pay those debts, so they don't need depositors' money. At the same time, they're saying that we don't make loans. We don't make loans because there's no demand for loans. There's no demand for loans because of the deflation that's caused by central banks bailing out these zombie banks. So they're at the center and they're the cause of the global financial crisis. And the fact is that if a bank is not paying on deposits, they don't need deposits. And if they're not, they don't need to make loans. Then what is it? It's not a bank, because the two things that a bank does is take deposits and make loans. Yeah. If you have these banks saying, we don't take deposits, we don't need them, and we don't make loans, then they're not banks. And we've been saying all along that they are not banks in the sense that they are fulfilling any kind of utilitarian value in the economy. They are an organized crime syndicate that is holding governments hostage and threatening to crash the economy unless the governments keep printing and giving them free money. That's called extortion. It's part of their crime wave.
But it also puts a lie to the fact that Mario Draghi says we need, he's just instituted this 1.1 trillion euros in quantitative easing, where this guy, this head of the Danish Banking Association, is saying there's surplus liquidity. We already have too much money. We bankers, we already have too much money. The banks don't need any more money. We don't need deposits. So what is this quantitative easing about then?
It's about extortion, and it's about a fundamental lie. It's about government in the UK, Cameron, Osborne, and government across Europe and the United States believing that by giving banks excess and surplus liquidity, that somehow this is going to stimulate lending and create real organic growth enough to create the tax revenue sufficient to pay down the institutionalized long-term structural debt that countries like the UK and the US have. It's not happening because the banks simply take the money, they don't make the loans, and then they coerce governments to change laws to make it even easier for them to continue this massive crime spree. And now it's getting to the point where through negative interest rates, they're just going to confiscate people's savings account. It's a bail-in. In other words, in Cyprus, they did a bail-in. MF Global and Jamie Dimon at J.P. Morgan did essentially a confiscation. They stole $1 billion. They confiscated that wealth.
But if it's done slowly, people tend to not mind it. So in Greece, people had their income slashed by 25%. Here in the UK, it's been 8% over a similar time. It's just equally as bad, but here there's no sign of the sort of unrest that you had in Greece.
It's
or the
wealth
fight back.
confiscation. I mean, how is it different than in governments past? I mean, they're scapegoating people. They're saying that if you are not part of the Goldman Sachs partners, you're less than human. They dehumanize people, and they confiscate their wealth because they are engaging in dehumanization. The language is dehumanization. You're not human enough to have real capital, so we're going to attack you.
But also another issue that you and I have brought up many times here, and I noticed that others in the mainstream media are actually picking up, is this price signaling, that central banks have destroyed price signaling, and negative interest rates are going to do that even more. Now remember, Warren Buffett said he doesn't invest in gold because it doesn't pay interest, and others say, I don't invest in gold because I don't know how to price it because there's no interest being paid on it. Here, there's negative rates being taken from your savings account. Your dollars, your euros, your pounds are worth negative amount of money. So how do you value anything?
Yes, of course. Gold, silver, Bitcoin are all stores of value in the face of negative interest rates. And Warren Buffett is absolutely, again, another huge error that he's made over the years. He's said some good things, he said some really stupid things, and his comments about gold are, in this case, are particularly stupid because, yes, it doesn't pay interest, but then again, it doesn't confiscate wealth as what happened now at the bank.
Exactly, and in fact, they do speak to a banker who's afraid. They speak to a few bankers. Some are afraid, some aren't afraid to start charging negative rates to normal, average Joe, saving depositors. So this one says, but taking the unprecedented step will make clients angry, seriously angry, said John Norden, CEO of My Banker, which researches bank prices for consumers. Quote, they'll go to another bank or stick it under their pillow. Again, stick it under their pillow. They're putting it under their mattress. We have said long ago that why not just buy gold? Because it's not like, in 1,000 years' time, as happens here often, that some, metals detector guy a detectorist is going to walk around and find your stash of paper money that you stuffed under your mattress, as is often done here. They find, essentially silver coins, hordes of silver coins stuffed under somebody's mattress of old days. Well, and it's worth something today.
This proves even more starkly, in stark terms, my point that quantitative easing causes deflation. What could be more deflationary than confiscating wealth from the vast majority of the population who then cannot invest, they can't save, they can't spend, because that money's just been stolen. That's deflationary. So I ask again, is deflation either caused by these central banks and bankers who are at 0% interest rates or negative interest rates? Or are they fighting deflation? They say they're fighting deflation. No, they're not. They're causing deflation as a way to keep their insolvent balance sheets from having to declare insolvency, and for all the executives at these banks having to find real jobs in the real economy.
And most importantly, though, they're counting on people being complacent. Look what they're waiting for. In this next and final quote here regarding this story, everyone's waiting for the first bank to start charging on deposits. Jesper Rangvid, a finance professor at Copenhagen Business School, said in a phone interview, quote, if the public says it makes sense, given the low central bank rates, then other banks will follow. But if they're screaming and shouting, then it depends on how long rates stay negative, he said. So if you respond with screams and shouts, they won't be able to do it. But if you're like, oh, okay, well, let's stop banker bashing. There's never enough basta. They're going to continue. They're going to take your money.
Look, in the old days, when you open an account with a bank, they used to give you a free toaster. Now they steal your toaster. They steal your house. They steal your car. They give you a disease. They give you, like, I mean, I'm sure some bank's going to start offering herpes. And, you know, open an account with us at HSBC. We'll give you financial herpes. And we'll take all your money, and we'll kill your dog. We're HSBC. We kill dogs.
Well,
I mean, what kind of bank is this? What kind of deal are we talking about here? What kind of frickin' shysters are these?
Okay, well, finally, in this deflationary spiral times, one bit of good news that consumers have, the mainstream media has told consumers that this is good news, is that cheaper oil will save you a couple tens of billions of dollars a year in the U.S. Well, cheap oil burns $390 billion hole in investors' pockets. Now that oil prices have fallen below $46, any euphoria over cheaper energy will be tempered by losses that are starting to show up in investment funds, retirement accounts, and bank balance sheets. The bear market has wiped out a total of $393 billion since June.
Yeah. They've been saying for years now that you don't need interest rates above zero, because you don't need savings, because people are saving in their asset accounts, which include house price speculation and speculation in oil. So now oil has collapsed. So that wasn't savings. It was not a savings account to speculate in oil at $140 a barrel. That's not savings. So now the same people are saying, well, in order to cure the fact that we were completely wrong about our definition of savings and completely wrong to steer you into speculative commodity investing and speculating, now we're going to put the cherry on the sundae by stealing your money through negative interest rates.
And finally, this is a great quote here that shows you the casino that it is. And it comes from Sean Wheeler, who is a Houston-based co-chairman of an oil and gas industry company. And he says, the only thing people are noticing now is that gas prices are dropping. People haven't noticed yet that it's also hitting their portfolios. So, you know,
because their asset prices are going to drop by 3-4 times more than they're saving at the pump. Net, they're going to lose. But I got, 10 extra P at the petrol station. I'm going to blow on a Kit Kat bar. Yeah, I'm winning. All right, Stacy, we got to go. I got to go fill up my SUV with Kit Kat bars.
Okay.
Stay tuned for the second half. A whole lot more.
For them, there are no citizens or foreigners, allies or enemies.
Spying on close friends and partners is totally unacceptable.
Law-abiders or criminals. There are only objects of surveillance.
Surveillance technologies have developed so quickly, and democratic controls have been much too slow.
I know CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News have taken some knocks lately, but the fact is I admire their commitment to cover all sides of a story, just in case one of them happens to be accurate.
That was funny, but it's closer to the truth than you might think. Because when politicians and the mainstream media work side by side, the joke is actually on you. At RT News, we have a different approach.
LOL.
Because the news of the world just is not this funny.
I'm not laughing, damn it, I'm not laughing.
You guys stick to the jokes, we'll handle the news.
Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Kerry-anne Mendoza, otherwise known as Scriptonite on her blog. And she's the author of this new book, Austerity, The Demolition of the Welfare State and the Rise of the Zombie Economy. It's now a top seller on Amazon, along with Thomas Piketty's book. Welcome to the Keiser Report.
Good to be here, Max. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, congratulations. This is zooming up the charts. I think it's the right book at the right time by the right author. So we've got it all. So first of all, let's just get our terms straight here. So what is austerity?
So austerity is basically the transfer of wealth from the have-nots to the have-yots. It's about moving money principally from the public sector, from the kind of wider real economy that makes things and builds things, and moving it into the zombie economy, which is the debt economy.
When George Osborne talks about austerity, he's lying basically because he says they need austerity to reduce the debt. Yeah. But the debt's gone up, both the deficit and the debt. The deficit recently and the debt overall, Britain is approaching almost $2 trillion in structural long-term indebtedness. So that's clearly not the goal. The goal, as you point out, is more of a wealth transfer.
Completely.
Where some of the tricks now in other countries like Greece, they finally said,
enough.
Enough. So what are your thoughts on Syriza and their victory in Greece?
I think it's absolutely awesome. I actually wrote a piece this week actually comparing the outcomes in Greece and the outcomes in Iceland. We had two fundamentally different approaches in 2007-8 when the nations were in pretty much similar places. They were on the verge of bankruptcy, principally because of kind of banker debt. And you know, you had Greece, which went the neoliberal route. It took on austerity, it took the IMF loan, and the economy has shrunk every year since. You've got 11% of the population in extreme material deprivation. That means they haven't got enough to eat, they haven't got enough for electricity and gas. You know, this is real poverty, grinding poverty.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people understand that before 2008. The IMF was facing extinction, facing a debt crisis of their own, and that they weren't making enough dodgy loans.
Yeah.
So the Greek crisis, the 2008 crisis came along just in time to bail out the IMF. They get
completely
back into the predatory loan business. And just on the UK front for a second, I'm having a bit of a digression. But I noticed that there was a recent clampdown on payday lenders like Wonga. And I think that's a direct result of campaigners like yourself, Russell Brand and others. Yeah. Is that a victory?
It's a huge victory, and I think they're going to keep coming because it's essentially, you know, the zombie economy is not sustainable, and the more people that realise it, the more people that are hurt by it, eventually they start building alternatives. And that's what's starting to happen now, is we've gone through kind of the stage of protest to just banging our feet, you know, banging our drums and looking to Parliament and saying, do something. Actually, people are starting to realise this group of politicians, these mainstream parties, are not the people. These institutions are not the institutions that are going to create a sort of workable alternative that works for the 99% rather than the 1%. And what's so exciting about that is you're seeing people then building these alternatives, like the kind of cryptocurrencies that you've been working on with Startcoin and kind of all of that stuff. You've got, you know, the emergence of cooperative businesses, you know, where people are saying we no longer want these hierarchical models where no one's really responsible. We want to actually work in a more cooperative way.
Yeah, I mean, and crowdfunding and cryptocurrencies, just in the UK, we've got two political organizations on StartJoin using the cryptocurrency Startcoin. We've got the Green Party, and we've also got George Galloway.
It's absolutely thrilling.
So they're both
exciting.
Crowdfunding and cryptocurrencies pushing back. And of course, let's go back to Greece for a second, because Greece was really, I think, the huge story that came after Iceland, if you know what I'm saying here. So Iceland, I want to talk about the zombie economy and get back to that. But first, would you agree that it was really Iceland set the stage for all of this? They pushed back against the banksters and the IMF and the crooks and the shysters and the Troika and the ECB. And then it kind of migrated to Greece. What do you think about this?
Well, like, one of the really exciting things about Iceland was it kind of was bottom up. You know, as the people going, no, we are not going to do this bailout. We're absolutely not doing that.
They had a referendum.
They did. They had a referendum. They brought in new politics. You know, they understood that it wasn't just about debt and it wasn't just about the financial services. It was the whole system that they were operating in that wasn't working, and that included their democratic institutions.
Remember, Greece was going to have a referendum.
Yeah.
And then they canceled it.
They did.
Because they realized, oh my God, they might vote us out. And now they've been voted out anyway.
Completely. I mean, that's the joke, is that you had the president of Iceland was asked, I think it was at Davos a couple of years ago, how on earth have you created this economic miracle in Iceland when, you know, the rest of Europe is in austerity and choking on its own debt? And he just turned around and looked at them and said, I ignored 30 years of neoliberal economics and I did exactly the opposite. You know, you think that's just beautiful. You know, they really got, you know, you cannot take the advice of a group of economists that not only didn't predict the financial crisis, but they told us it was impossible. Impossible. You know, economists that use, you know, economic models that don't even include time, debt, you know, in the models, and you go, these people are, it's ideological. This is not a kind of anywhere near a kind of scientific economic process. You've just got ideologues saying, do this, do this, do this. Okay. And governments take the advice and then they end up in debt, and so do we.
3 words.
Yeah.
Rule of law. I think what Iceland came down on the side of the rule of law. Yeah. They said the banks are committing crimes. We need to put them in jail. We need to prosecute them.
Absolutely.
We need to close them down. We need to change the management. We need to respect the rule of law. It's not an ideological discussion whether it's neoliberalism of austerity or money printing or Paul Krugman versus Steve Keen. It's about, are we going to respect any kind of rule of law? They said, let's do rule of law. Let's get rid of the crooks. And as a result, they've had a brilliant, you know, recovery from having been hijacked by crooks. Greece came to the point of saying the same thing. We want rule of law. Is the current finance minister and the current president of Greece, are they ideologues? Not really. Are they far leftist? No, not really. Are they any kind of political organization that is, according to the BBC, in league with the devil? No. They simply want rule of law. Rule of law. Now, what about Spain? Is Spain going to be the next domino to fall and accept the rule of law?
I would expect so. I mean, they would be crazy not to. I think if they're looking at Iceland, they're looking at Greece. You know, personally, if I was in Spain, I would be voting for an anti-austerity party. And this is an exciting time to be a European right now.
You know what's amazing, Kerry-anne, is that before Greece had this election and before the finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis. Yanis, I'm sorry, I always kill your name. Before this all happened, people said, well, if Greece doesn't accept these measures, they'll be consigned to 1,000 years dark age of abject poverty.
I mean, it's just, it's the same story every time.
In the first few days, France said, yeah, we can accept a haircut.
Yeah.
The whole Eurozone saying, well, 50% seems okay. Like, they're completely false. Why? Because they're just bond sellers. They'll take any deal on the table. They're not finessing a deal. You know, if you default on one deal, they'll start a new deal. They don't care. They don't care.
I know. It's just the most absurd argument ever. I mean, there is not one single case in history of a nation applying austerity measures in a time of economic crisis and growing the economy out of it, and actually, you know, with decent wages and everything else. It's never happened in history. You know, so the very same people that told you, yeah, we should deregulate the financial services industry and business is booming and forget about all of these unsustainable mortgages, it's all going to be fine. Those same people, that's the same people that are now saying, austerity will work, this is what we need to be doing. And it's just kind of like, at which point do you go, these people are crazy? Last time we took their advice, we ended up in like a global economic crisis. Why are we still listening to these people? And thank goodness you've now got members of the public that are saying, enough. You know, you're not going to turn us against each other. I mean, that's one of the most insidious things that's happened in austerity nations, is it's the scapegoating. You know, this sort of resurgent fascism that happened in Greece, it's happening elsewhere too. You even got it happening here on a sort of a proto-fascist level with the UKIPers and the EDL, where people start going, oh, it's really bad because too many immigrants. It's really bad because the NHS, because scroungers. And it's kind of like, that was never the issue. It was not the cause of the financial crisis.
No, I'd like to hear Nigel Farage talk about rule of law.
He never talks about
I don't think he's ever mentioned rule of law.
Well, completely. It's like, imagine if he said, we're going to stand up for British interests. You know, we're going to make sure that all of the Saudi Arabian money that is buying up property across London and inflating house prices, we're not going to have that anymore. We're going to reduce the property prices in London so that people who are naturalised citizens here can have houses.
Well, the whole UK has changed dramatically. You've got Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, England, and then there's a zone down in the south southeast,
Yeah.
that's really a vassal state of Qatar. You know, they just bought the Canary Wharf. They bought the Shard. They're buying it all. It's Qatar. This is Qatar.
Yeah.
London is Qatar.
Yeah.
It's more Qatar than it is British.
I mean, it's crazy, and it's, you know, and even like the sovereignty issue with the City of London that you've got, where it's basically a self-contained state anyway. You know, it kind of has its own rules. It's got the remembrancer, the guy in Parliament who's just allowed to sit there and watch everything, who, you know, works on behalf of the city. And, you know, there are so many issues right now that are going on. The idea that, you know, UKIP are an alternative because they're blaming the poorest and the most vulnerable people in the country for the ills is like, that's as old as the hills.
So austerity is a hoax. Osborne is a shyster because he's adding to the debt. He's adding to the deficit. There's no economic theory behind it to support these austerity measures.
None.
All they're doing is a wealth transfer from the many to the few, and we see it in the numbers. The few are getting tripling and quadrupling their net worth, and everyone else's standard of living is falling. You know, you do have a bubble in the real estate market, but that's unsustainable. You know, especially when you see a lot of the geopolitical activities going on, including countries like Russia, well, they just pull out of their speculative money out of the London real estate market, and that the top end is now starting to fall in. So that's very illusory. That's not savings. No. You know, in this country, they think that saving money and being paid interest on your savings is evil. But speculating in the real estate market is quote unquote savings. Whereas saving in the real estate market is speculation, is a vice, like gambling. Whereas savings and getting an interest on your money is called capitalism. You can't have capitalism without capital. You can't have capital without interest rates. Now, interest rates in 16% of all the sovereign, we only have about a minute. We may have to, can you stay over for a second segment?
Of course.
Okay, so let me just ask this question. So 16% of the global sovereign debt market is now negative interest rates. Like in Switzerland, where you have to pay the bank 1% for them to keep your money. And they just take 1% out every year now. And 16% of all the sovereign debt is like this around the world. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that's the point of the zombie economy, is that it starts to focus more on making money for people who are speculators than it does on people who are trying to build things, who are trying to, you know, kind of... I think people have this kind of fairy tale view of capitalism that I think a lot of us were brought up on, which is the idea that it's, you know, you take something, you add some value to it, you sell it at a profit, and that's okay. We don't mind the profit because you've added value to the thing. In the zombie economy, it works entirely the opposite way.
Okay, hold that thought. Zombie economy. We're going to pick it up from there. If you can stay on for a second segment of Kerry-anne, that's okay.
I can.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode of the Keiser Report with Max Keiser and Stacy Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Kerry-anne Mendoza. She'll be around for another segment in our next show. Her new book is called Austerity: The Demolition of the Welfare State and the Rise of the Zombie Economy. If you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time. Bye, y'all.